welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, Harlingen, Texas, to be exact. A little later in the program, we're going to hear from our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez, on the upcoming Mexican-American Heritage Month and some of the things that are happening out in his area of responsibility as far as coverage. So looking forward to checking in with him in just a little bit. But first, we wanted to see what's making headlines across the border. And today we begin in California, where the community of El Sobrante, California, is rallying in support of a 73-year-old grandmother who was detained by ICE last week. Her name is Harjit Kaur, and she was taken into custody during a routine check-in at an immigration court in San Francisco. Now, her family says that she came to the U.S. from India 30 years ago and that she has had no criminal records since coming here 30 years ago. And that they added that she also attends every immigration check-in that she has scheduled every 6 months. At this point, their biggest concern is that she's not getting the medical care that she needs while she's in detention. Also happening, a federal judge extended a temporary order preventing the Trump administration from deporting Guatemalan migrant children. Now, this judge's decision came down on Saturday, keeping the government from removing Guatemalan children who came to the U.S. alone as unaccompanied children. Now, this all started over Labor Day weekend. We've been telling you about this for a couple of weeks. We told you we'd keep an eye on this as well. But that's when the Trump administration tried to remove dozens of Guatemalan migrant children, taking them to airports in El Paso. And right here in Harlingen, Texas, the video that you're seeing right now was actually shot by our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez. Now, those planes were held on the tarmac and ultimately did not take off. So what's happening right now? Well, the children are currently living in government shelters in foster care. We've told you about this before. There's no way for us to really know what's going on with these children because they are protected since they fall under the Department of Health and Human Services for the federal government instead of ICE or any department within DHS. But lawyers for the government previously said that the children's parents had asked for their children to be returned, but the government backtracked those claims, prompting the judge to extend the order for the children to stay in the U.S. Again, just a note there that South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez and I had talked about previously that a lot of these migrant children actually were coming from the rural areas of Guatemala, which, if you know anything about those rural areas, it's sometimes really difficult to find someone who speaks either English or Spanish. So that was the concern with nonprofits claiming, when the government claimed that they had been contacted by parents, those concerns about language barriers and translation barriers had arisen. But again, the judge did, the government backtracked those claims, prompting the judge to extend the order for those children to stay right here in the United States. Also happening, more than 3,000 undocumented migrants have been arrested in Operation Lone Star 2.0, according to an investigation by the Texas Tribune. Now, these arrests are part of a push by the Texas Department of Public Safety to aid the Trump administration's push for mass deportations. Now, according to records obtained by the Texas Tribune, those arrests began in late January and continued through September. They point out that the arrests related to federal immigration law are usually carried out by federal authorities like ICE or Border Patrol. So this truly marks an unprecedented use of state resources for federal law enforcement. Now, Latino leaders in Chicago are trying to bring attention to recent incidents involving immigration enforcement. Last week, an ICE officer shot and killed the man who reportedly tried to evade arrest, driving his car at officers and dragging one of them. Watch.
Surveillance cameras capturing the deadly encounter about 8:50 this morning in Franklin Park. An arrest team working to take the driver of this car into custody at 9840 West Grand Avenue. Reports from ICE today describing the driver as a criminal illegal alien. The suspect resisted and attempted to drive his vehicle into the arrest team, spokespeople say, striking an officer and subsequently dragging him as he fled the scene. Fearing for his life, the officer discharged his firearm and struck the subject. The gunshots captured on the surveillance cameras of a nearby Franklin Park auto repair and tire shop.
Franklin Park is heavily Latino, so Yes, my fear was that ICE would be coming here.
People in the neighborhood stunned to see a large number of federal agents converging on the scene. Images captured by witnesses showing ICE agents rendering aid to the mortally wounded driver who later succumbed to his injuries at an area hospital. An ICE agent suffering serious injuries, spokespeople say, and he is still recovering. WGN investigates, shedding light on the dead suspect, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, identified by the Department of Homeland Security. Court records show Villegas Gonzalez's only prior cases in Cook County have been for traffic violations. 4 cases in all dating back to 2010. The most recent traffic case was in 2019 for operating an uninsured motor vehicle. He has also been cited several times previously for infractions, including speeding, driving on an expired license, and without insurance as well, violating Chicago's muffler noise ordinance.
You know, and with these incidents happening across the country, Latino leaders are urging the public to embrace Hispanic Heritage Months that may be taking place over the next 30 days within their communities, and using this month to spread awareness of Hispanic culture in the United States. And that brings us to what we're going to talk about when we come back. We're going to be joined by our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez, to discuss how cities across the United States are canceling ethnic festivals. But over where he's at in El Paso, leaders are actually hoping that non-Hispanics will reduce fear by embracing our culture. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. Now, today marks the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month, but some cities across the country are actually canceling their festivities. In Springfield, Illinois, for example, the El Grito Festival, which typically draws thousands, was canceled. And that was supposed to take place today on the west steps of the Illinois State Capitol building. On the festival's website, a statement says, quote, "It was a painful decision, but holding El Grito Chicago at this time puts the safety of our community at stake, and that's a risk we are not, or rather we are unwilling to take." Time now to bring in our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez. I know, Julian, over where you're at, the festivities will go on.
Really good to be back in the show. Yes, absolutely. There are 68 million people of Hispanic descent in the United States. Not all of them are migrants, I'm sorry. Many of them came 2, 3, 4, 5 generations back. In Hispanic Heritage Month, which typically runs from the 15th of September to the 15th of October, is a way for them to not only celebrate their culture, but also let other people know what they're all about. These festivals typically involve folkloric dancing, exhibitions of arts and crafts, music. They emphasize their music a lot, playing their music, letting other people hear their music. Here in El Paso, we had an advanced celebration this past weekend, and we talked to a local official, El Paso County Judge Ricardo Samaniego, who says that these events are opportunities, like I said, for other people to get to know Hispanics, to lose fear of Hispanics, and to also get to know the community. A lot of them, like I said, date back several generations. They are part not only of business, but also government. Many elected officials have Hispanic backgrounds, including people serving in the U.S. Congress. So he says that he is shocked by this environment of fear that is going on, and that he hopes that people will take the opportunity to lose their fears, to, if not mingle, at least observe these celebrations. We have a statement from him.
And I think some of the hatred that we've been seeing recently comes from lack of understanding, not understanding who we are, and not understanding the culture. So Hispanic is more significant. I'm glad you asked that question, because Hispanic month is more significant than just una fiesta. It's also an opportunity to show the world our contribution as Hispanics, how we are, and the openness. I mean, we reach out. We want people to come here from all over the world and enjoy our culture and our language.
So that's the original purpose of Hispanic Heritage. Unfortunately, what is going on this year is that it's coinciding with the stepped up ICE operations to look for first criminal migrants, and then whichever other undocumented migrants they happen to find. And like you said, Rudy, Chicago is the most prominent city so far to have canceled a Hispanic Heritage event, but there are numerous others, including in Washington State, in Oregon, and in several places on the East Coast, including a small city in Massachusetts. And they all cite the same concern. We don't know if ICE is going to show up, and people who came with their families to celebrate who they are, to celebrate their culture, are going to get picked up. So we're not willing to run that risk. So we're calling them off for this year and see what happens.
You know, it's really interesting. One point you made that, you know, folks that have been in the United States for 4 or 5 generations now, but that's not to include people, you know, that have been, for example, here in the Rio Grande Valley, we have had several generations since Texas, Mexico, this part of Mexico became Texas, and they've been living here during that transition period. So, you know, it's not just, you know, migrants coming over, it's people that were actually on this land before it became the United States as well.
Degraded. Cities. It is a celebration. Find themselves in quagmire.
Julian, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but we're having some technical difficulties with the audio. We are going to take a very, very quick break, and we will be right back with Julian Resendez to continue this conversation. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, Harlingen, Texas, to be exact. Let's bring back in our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez, having some technical difficulties, but we got you back, sir. One of the things we were talking about before we had to cut to the break was the one thing that you mentioned, and I had kind of touched on, that some of these people aren't even migrants technically. They were here before this land actually became the United States. So the culture truly is one that's so deeply ingrained all across the country, and especially down here on the southern border.
Yeah, that's right. I have some numbers from the Pew Research Center. Of the 68.1 million Hispanics in the United States, only a fraction, less than half, are immigrants. Everybody else has been here for several generations, and like you point out, even way back, even before the U.S. came into being, with the Spaniards who were here. So yeah, it's a celebration of the community more than it is of any immigration related issue, although they do celebrate the contributions of immigrants as well.
Now, let me ask you this, Julian. You said El Paso had their festival this past weekend to celebrate the start of the Hispanic Heritage Month. You know, what kind of things were going on there, and how was the turnout? Did it, you know, you've been reporting in El Paso for a long time now. How was the turnout at this event compared to events you've seen in the past?
I think the turnout was about the same as in prior years, but these are celebrations sponsored by the government, by the local business community. So they're not massive events. The massive events take place usually because we're right smack on the border with Mexico, and there's so many people that have family in Mexico. The massive events take place across the border, and they start tonight with the grito ceremony. The grito was the call to Mexican independence from Spain, uttered in 1810, and it's celebrated every year on the night of the 15th. Obviously, the Mexican Revolution started, the Mexican War of Independence started right the next day on September 16th, and that's the official holiday. They have parades, they have music. It's a total celebration. A lot of people from El Paso go across the border to celebrate in Juarez, Mexico. In fact, according to studies that we have brought up in the show before, 60% of the people from El Paso, Americans who cross into Juarez, they do so for family reasons. So the family ties are very, very strong.
And we see very similar down here. We have a lot of us that live here in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. We cross back and forth all the time, not just to buy or to shop or to go contribute to their economy, but oftentimes it's just to go see abuela, abuelo, los tíos, los tías that are still living on the other side of the border. So it's very interesting. But one of the reasons, obviously with all the increased ICE activity ramping up, that's one of the reasons behind this. But I know over there on your side of the Texas-Mexico border, we're seeing more National Guard troops coming to the area. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing on that front.
That's right, Rudy. Late last week, we got notice from the local Border Patrol chief that 500 Texas National Guard troops had just arrived in the city, and that these troops are going to supplement the work, the border security work of the Border Patrol. In this case, the Texas soldiers that just landed in El Paso are going to be primarily doing infrastructure work, such as you're seeing right there on our screen. And that involves putting up fences or servicing fences with concertina wire or chain link that were previously put up by the same group, by the Texas Army National Guard. Now, let me explain what the difference is between when the soldiers were here last year, which is what you're seeing on the screen, and what they're doing now. Back in 2024, Texas Army National Guard soldiers arrived here on the initiative of the governor of Texas. He sent them here to pretty much defend the state because, according to him, to Mr. Greg Abbott, President Biden was not doing the job. So he volunteered the job. Now, with this new 500 soldiers that are coming in, they are fully in sync with the federal government, with the federal authorities. So the Border Patrol this weekend released a video pretty much celebrating the arrival of this new 500 troops. There you have it on your screen.
Yeah, we're having a little problem with the video playing, but as you said, they were celebrating that effort to bring troops in. So this is part of the federal deployment, like we kind of saw in Los Angeles or some of the other cities in California. Then,
well, it's a little different because this is a joint initiative with the state of Texas. What I can tell you is, as far as the federal troops, we have seen those Department of Defense troops active mostly on the New Mexico side of the El Paso sector of the U.S. Border Patrol. And it's a huge sector. It runs from far west Texas in Hudspeth County, all the way through El Paso, all across the state line into New Mexico, and it runs straight into the New Mexico-Arizona state line. So those federal troops we have seen mostly on the New Mexico side. So these troops from Texas, obviously, they will operate on the portion of the sector that falls in Texas. I can tell you that the migrant activity continues to be kind of at a slowdown. A couple of weeks ago, we were reporting an all-time low of about 37 daily apprehensions of migrants coming over. Now it's starting to rise up a little bit. We're between 40 and 50 apprehensions per day. And that might also explain why Texas is coming right now back to the border like they are.
Yeah, and I just pulled up some numbers. We have the July migrant apprehension numbers there, and you can see right there across the entire southern border on July 20th of this year, only 116 people were caught crossing in between the ports of entry. So, that and that's the other question here, right? I guess that's the continuing question we have, especially for those of us that live in the state of Texas, is when does the mission for the state, earlier we were talking about Operation Lone Star, which the Texas Tribune found recently has arrested more than 3,000 undocumented migrants. These forces coming to the border, but shouldn't the border technically be more secure now that, following the rationale that they were using to send troops down here, that President Biden's no longer in office and President Trump has got the most secure border?
Yeah, that's correct. The numbers tell the story. Since President Trump has been in office, the number of migrants apprehended has come down, primarily because the asylum option is no longer in force. Before, we saw thousands of people cross the border and turn themselves in. Now, nobody can cross the border and expect that same privilege. Whoever crosses the border between ports of entry without authorization is immediately apprehended and sent over for a civil immigration prosecution. So what I think what's going on is, like I said, we're starting to see a little bit of a tick up in the numbers, and that has to do with what's going on in Mexico. The cartels lately, like we reported maybe a week ago, a couple of weeks ago, have been running social media ads, misleading people, not only in southern Mexico, but also through their associates in other countries, such as Ecuador, Venezuela, that the asylum option is either back on or the asylum option will be back on shortly. So that might be accounting for the spike in numbers. And that might account why Texas, we're seeing this influx of Texas officers, Texas soldiers to the border. We know that Lone Star has never stopped. What we know is that when the federal government took over the more comprehensive enforcement here in El Paso and other parts of Texas, we kind of saw the Texas soldiers, the number of Texas soldiers diminish. Now we're again seeing those soldiers come back.
One thing you mentioned is that story, I believe it was your reporting a couple weeks ago, as you said, on those social media ads that cartels are putting out. Since then, have we heard of any efforts by either side of the border, governments on either side of the border, kind of combating these messages that the cartels are sending to people who are just looking to get to the United States?
What the U.S. Border Patrol is doing is that they're putting out this messages online themselves, telling people the cartels are lying, the smugglers, the coyotes are lying to you. There is no asylum. You come over and you will be apprehended. That was part of the video that we were supposed to play before technical problems today, but it's all spelled out in there. So yeah, the U.S. is doing some counterintelligence work with the cartels. They have the ability to send this message in English and in Spanish. And of course, social media has no borders. People can see it anywhere in the world.
You know, it's interesting because they can, put these messages on social media, but the Trump administration isn't actually the first administration to send that message. And in the previous administration, Vice President Kamala Harris, I remember her saying very distinctly, very clearly, do not come here because we are not going to just take you in right away. Is there any hope that these messages are actually going to work this time around if they're coming maybe from a law enforcement capacity versus just an elected official?
I think that if the messages were coming from trusted members of the community, trusted members of society in these countries, I think that would be more effective. However, we're dealing with countries that don't think like the U.S. For instance, Mexico for the longest time has had a humanitarian approach toward migration. And so did the Biden administration up until June of 2024, when President Biden pretty much said, okay, no more asylum in between ports of entry. Let's all get an appointment. And if you don't have an appointment, just wait, because if you cross, we're going to apprehend you and we're going to prosecute you. So it is very difficult to have a continental-wide agreement on how to deal with illegal migration, number one, and two, what resources to dedicate to stopping these cartels. In many countries, the cartels represent a huge public safety risk. Some countries, including Mexico, have tried to take on the cartels directly, like President Calderon did back in the mid-2000s. And the results were not very good. The government just could not take out these cartels. So it's mostly the U.S., the initiative mostly falls in the United States to deal with these cartels.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your reporting today, Julian. We appreciate you being here despite the technical difficulties. So thank you so much for all of this very interesting stuff. We appreciate you being here.
Likewise.
All right. And before we go, got a couple of things that we wanted to tell you about, starting with from immigration to trade, security to culture. You can now catch Border Report Live, diving deep into the issues impacting life along the U.S.-Mexico border on your commute, while you're out walking the dog, or maybe you're out grocery shopping with the family. Just pop us in your earbud, because you can join us for expert interviews, on-the-ground reporting, and the latest developments you're not going to hear anywhere else in a podcast form. You can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, and you can get both the audio and video version of Border Report Live on your YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out as well. Also wanted to tell you that before we go, we want to remind you to check out our partners at Political Power Ranker. That is a weekly show tracking the movers, shakers, and rule makers in American politics. Nextstar's Director of Political Content, Chris Berg, and Director of Emerson College Polling, Spencer Kimball, break down who's up and who's down in the world of politics based on data. This week's episode, and it is a big one, is focusing on the New York City mayoral race. I actually just got done watching that episode right before we came on the air today. Some pretty exciting and interesting stuff from Chris and Spencer there. So make sure to check it out. You can find more on Political Power Ranker at abc27.com or your local Nextstar station's website. And that is going to do it for us today. For our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez, my name is Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen, Texas. Have a good day.